I have been doing land survey work for going on 14 years. Remote sections, unmapped terrain, grid coordinates that have not had a human set foot on them in decades sometimes. I have worked alone in places most people would not feel comfortable in for an hour, let alone a full week. I am telling you this because I need you to understand the baseline before I tell you what I noticed. Because what bothered me was not something dramatic. It was something small and wrong. And in 14 years of remote work, small and wrong is the thing that gets your attention faster than anything else. This was a grid section in a remote stretch of Pacific Northwest forest. Dense. Old growth. The kind of canopy that blocks out most sky by midday. I was 3 days into a 5-day mapping deployment. Solo, which is standard for this kind of work. No cell service, satellite communicator on my belt, everything normal. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, I started hearing a sound. The best way I can describe it is a bird call. Specific pattern, 3 notes, pause, 2 notes, pause, repeat. I have spent enough time in Pacific Northwest old growth to know the bird calls in that terrain. This was not one I recognized, which was not unusual in itself. What was unusual was the consistency. Most bird calls have variation. Pitch changes slightly. Timing shifts. The bird moves. This call was identical every time. Same 3 notes, same 2 notes, same pause length. For over an hour from a fixed point to my northeast that did not change. I told myself it was a species I had not encountered before. I kept working. What I could not keep telling myself, about 40 minutes later, was that I had not moved far enough for the call to still be coming from the same direction at the same volume if the source was a living animal. I'd covered almost a kilometer of terrain. The call was still northeast of me. Still the same distance. Still the same volume. Something was moving with me. Staying at the same distance. Calling at the same interval. I stopped. I stood still for about 2 minutes. The call continued. Then I did something I cannot fully explain even now. I called back. I approximated the pattern as best I could. 3 notes, pause, 2 notes. I did it once. The forest went completely silent. Not gradually, immediately. Every ambient sound I had been tuned into for 3 days, gone, for about 30 seconds. Then the normal sounds came back. Birds, wind, the creak of old growth. Everything except the call. I finished the deployment. I did not hear the call again for the rest of the trip. But I have done a lot of Pacific Northwest remote work since then, and I have not heard that specific pattern in any terrain I have been in since. Not once. I'm not telling you what I think it was. I'm telling you that whatever it was, it knew I had answered. And it stopped when I did. 14 years of remote survey work. A call pattern that stayed at the same distance for over an hour across a kilometer of terrain. Silence the moment he called back. Subscribe to Obscure Nights, because the accounts that have no explanation are the ones that deserve to be heard. Does the fact that it went silent the moment he responded tell you it was waiting to see if he would answer? Or does that silence tell you something else entirely? Drop what you think below. My hiking partner, Reeve, and I had been doing remote backcountry trips together for about 6 years when this happened. We were both experienced. We both carried proper gear, and we both had the kind of easy trail communication that comes from doing dozens of trips with the same person. We did not spook easily, and we did not dramatize things. That matters for what I am about to describe. This was a 4-day trip in a remote section of the northern Cascades. Second day out. Weather was perfect. Mid-50s, clear sky, no wind. We were in good spirits. We had covered good ground in the morning and were moving through a dense section of old growth in the early afternoon. Reeve stopped first. He did not say anything. He just stopped walking and looked at his GPS unit. I almost walked into him. I asked what was wrong, and he showed me the screen. The unit was cycling. Not frozen, not dead, actively cycling through screens as if it was rebooting on a loop. His GPS had never done that in 6 years of trips together. I pulled out my own unit. Same thing. We both stood there for a moment looking at our screens. Then Reeve said something I have not forgotten. He said, "Do you hear that?" And I realized I did not. Not the silence of a quiet forest. The specific absence of sound that you only notice when you have been in enough old growth to know what it normally sounds like. No wind movement in the canopy. No birds. Nothing. That is when I looked up. There was something at the tree line approximately 40 meters ahead of us. I want to be precise about what I mean when I say something because I have thought about this for 3 years and I still cannot give it a shape. It was not an animal I recognized. It was not a person. It occupied a space in the tree line that was darker than the trees around it. Not a shadow, not a shape with edges, just a section of the forest that was wrong in a way that my eyes kept returning to and my brain kept refusing to process. Reeve grabbed my arm. When I looked back at the tree line, the section was just trees. Normal. The canopy moving slightly in wind I had not noticed returning. Both GPS units cleared simultaneously. The forest sounds came back. A bird called from somewhere above us. Everything normal. We kept walking. We did not talk about it for about an hour. When we did, Reeve said something I keep coming back to. He said he had not wanted to point his headlamp directly at it because he had the feeling that acknowledging it directly was the wrong thing to do. I have no explanation for what stopped our GPS units. I have no explanation for the silence or for what I saw at the tree line. What I have is 6 years of backcountry trips with Reeve, and the knowledge that neither of us has done a remote section of the northern Cascades since that trip. We have never talked about going back. What do you think was standing at that tree line? And does the fact that both GPS units cleared the moment it was gone tell you the two things were connected? Or is that a coincidence the terrain explains? Drop what you think below. The third account tonight is different from the first two. The first two describe something encountered. The third describes something left behind. A SAR volunteer working a search in Tennessee backcountry who found a campsite that nobody had run from. Nobody had panicked in. Nobody had packed up and left. Whatever happened at that campsite happened in the space between 1 second and the next. And the person inside it was just gone. I want to be upfront about something before I start. I have done SAR work for 8 years. I have found campsites that were abandoned in a hurry, gear scattered, food knocked over, tent unzipped and left. I know what fear looks like in a campsite. It has a specific signature. What I found in that Tennessee backcountry section in October 2021 did not have that signature. It had something I did not have a word for until I started trying to explain it to people. The word I keep landing on is interrupted. The missing subject was a solo hiker, male, 34 years old, 3-day trip, reported overdue by his emergency contact. I was part of a secondary search team working an expanding grid from his last confirmed waypoint, a trail register entry 2 days before the report came in. I found the campsite about 4 miles from that register. The tent was set up correctly, properly staked, rain fly attached. The kind of setup an experienced hiker does without thinking. His pack was outside the tent, open, with items laid out beside it in what looked like the early stages of being organized for the following morning. His water filter was assembled on a flat rock beside the pack. A sealed meal pouch sat next to it, the kind you add boiling water to. The pot was on his camp stove. The stove was off. The water in the pot was cold. His journal was open on the tent's ground sheet. The last entry was mid-sentence. Not the end of a thought, not even the end of a clause. A sentence that stopped at a comma. The pen was lying across the open page. I have found abandoned campsites where people ran. The gear tells you. Things knocked sideways, food left open, tent unzipped, the body moving faster than the mind can organize. This campsite did not tell me that story. The gear was organized. The water filter was assembled. The meal pouch was ready to be opened. The stove was off. Whatever he was doing when it happened, he was not afraid. He was not hurrying. He was doing the next thing in a sequence of normal evening camp tasks. And then the sequence stopped. He was not found during the search I was part of. I do not know the current status of his case. What I filed in my incident report was the physical description of the campsite, the gear, the position of items, the open journal. What I did not file was what the journal entry said, not because it was irrelevant, because I could not figure out how to write it in language that would survive a review. The last line in his journal, the sentence that stopped at a comma, read, "Something just walked into the edge of camp and I think it." And that was all. An organized campsite, a cold pot of water, a meal pouch ready to open, a pen lying across an open journal, a sentence that stopped at a comma. Subscribe to Obscure Nights right now, because the cases that close without answers are the ones this channel exists for. Does the organized state of that campsite tell you whatever happened gave him no time to react? Or does a sentence that stops mid-thought tell you he saw it coming and simply ran out of seconds? Drop your answer below. 3 accounts. 3 different wilderness encounters. And in all 3, the detail that mattered most was not what was seen. It was what was left behind. The campsite in the 3rd account told a searcher everything about the state of the person who had been in it. Organized gear, assembled equipment, a stove that had been used and turned off, a journal open to an active entry. That campsite communicated without words. Here is what experienced SAR coordinators recommend every backcountry camper do before they go to sleep. Not for the horror scenario, but for any scenario where a search becomes necessary. Leave a visible note inside your tent at ground level every night listing your planned route for the following day. Not in your pack. Inside the tent, at the door. A searcher who finds your campsite and your tent should know within 30 seconds which direction you were headed and where you expected to be by midday. Leave your emergency contact information and your satellite communicator on top of your sleeping bag or directly beside it, not buried in a pocket of your pack. If something happens to you and a search team finds your camp, your satellite communicator is the fastest way to understand your last transmitted position. Buried in a pack, it takes minutes to locate. On top of your sleeping bag, it takes seconds. And if you keep a trail journal, which is one of the best habits a backcountry hiker can develop, date and timestamp every entry, not just the day, the time. A time-stamped journal entry is a piece of evidence a SAR team can use to establish a timeline. The hiker in the 3rd account had an open journal. A timestamp on that entry would have told searchers something specific about when the sequence stopped. 3 simple habits. They take 30 seconds each, and in a search scenario, they are the difference between a campsite that communicates and one that just sits there. These accounts are open. The woods kept what they took. To the 3 people who trusted Obscure Nights with these accounts, the surveyor who answered back and has never heard that call again, the 2 hikers who have not returned to the northern Cascades, and the SAR volunteer who did not file the last line of that journal entry. Your accounts deserve to be heard. Thank you for trusting this channel with them. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. The links are in the channel bio. Every follow keeps these accounts reaching people who need to hear them. And if you want to support Obscure Nights, we are working toward replacing the AI voice with a real voice actor so these stories sound the way they deserve to sound. The support link is in the bio. This is Obscure Nights, where the cases nobody talks about get told the way they actually happened. Good night.